I know what it is to have to make the daily choice of leaning into faith rather than leaning into fear. In the recent years, my wife and I, we went through a valley moment, a valley season. One day, I received the best news. I remember it as clear as today. She ran into the living room, Dan, holding that magic stick. I'm pregnant. I remember hearing those words and it just filling my heart with joy. I remember thinking of all the things that we needed to get done, and suddenly all the things I needed to do around the house, and all the plans and all the preparations and everything I had to put into place. And I remember thinking, but it was just such a sense of excitement, a sense of joy. We started to get things ready, and we started to have the midwife appointments. And I remember a few months after that moment, sat in the nurse's ward, holding my wife's hand as the midwife was doing a scan. See, my wife had started to bleed. And we went for the scan, and I remember the words the midwife spoke as she held the microphone against Nachisa's belly, and she said, you know, there's a problem. There's a problem with this baby's heartbeat. It's too slow. It's not strong enough. It's too weak. I remember those words. It's like they threw us into a valley place. But you know, the midwife said, come back in a couple of weeks. We'll do another scan. We'll see how it goes. And my wife and I, we are not settling here. That was our resolve. We are not staying here. We pressed into the promises of God. We gathered the scripture. We gathered the word. And we said, we're moving forward. And we started to lean into God. And I remember in the weeks that followed, the bleeding wouldn't stop. And we had word that my wife had had a miscarriage. That hit us. That was a dark moment. There was a shadow being cast over us. But you know, we have learned in the last few weeks that it's not the absence of a shadow that makes the difference, but the presence of a shepherd. And you know, in that moment, in that despair, in that hurt, in that grief, in that pain, we were so aware there was a shepherd with us, and he was moving us forward. In the months that followed, months had passed, and we moved out of that valley, and I had the wonderful news again. My wife was expecting again. The joy started to build, the excitement started to build. But I remember going for one of those routine scans again, and once again being sat in that ward holding my wife's hand as the nurse picked up that microphone to listen into the baby's heartbeat. And you know, in that moment, it was like I could physically feel fear was trying to grip me. I could feel its arms trying to wrap itself around me, take hold of me. It was a physical feeling that I was frozen in the spot, and I was in a ward. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do much. But you know, in that moment, I had to make a decision. What am I leaning into here? Is it faith or is it fear? And on the inside, you better believe it, I stood up in that moment on the inside, and I screamed at the top of my voice, fear, you have no hold of me. You have no hold of my wife. You have no hold of my baby. And I leant into the promises of God. And in that moment, I heard that beautiful noise, the strong heartbeat of our child. And today we have little Lewis, 14 weeks old, an answer to prayer. I know what it is to lean into faith rather than fear. My encouragement to you today is, regardless of the situation you're facing, regardless of what the walls are screaming, regardless of what shadows are being cast, I want to encourage you. This is a moment to lean into faith and not into fear.